I think it's about time I covered something in its own segment that I've been saying for quite a long time, and I'm going to start out by paraphrasing a quote from Mark Kern. He said something to the effect of, if you try to market everything towards some global audience, then what that's going to do is result in you dropping down to the lowest common denominator of censorship and human rights. And he is 100% correct, which is why all of this global audience bullshit is bullshit. And that's all the proof you need right there. Because he's right. Different countries around the globe have different standards. They have different laws even. Something that is perfectly accepted and legal where you live could be a high crime punishable by death somewhere else. So if we're going to be appealing to a global audience, you can't have that thing you want that's perfectly accepted and legal because someone somewhere else in the world doesn't like it. And this is the future we are heading towards as all of these games and movie companies like Hollywood and these AAA game developers, as they move towards global audience and global standards. We've already been seeing this with gaming in particular. For the longest time, the US has been forcing Japan to censor because of global standards. And they finally did it in current year -3 when Sony moved the PlayStation headquarters to the US. And then they just turned around and decided, even if you're making your game for Japan and only ever to be released in Japan, you're going to have to censor it because global standards. Everything is now going to be for global standards. And you had cucks all over the West cheering this decision. Like, thank God we finally solved that misogynies. They were happy about it. Now, some of them didn't care. They're, I don't care. I don't care about the anime titties getting censored. That doesn't affect me any. And exactly as I've been saying since even before Gamergate, if you let the front lines fall, you eventually become the new front lines. So guess what the fuck happened? China decided to step in and say, you Western companies, if you want access to our market, like a quarter of the world's population, it's a lot of fucking money right there, a lot of potential customers. If you want access to them, you're gonna censor yourselves. Not just the product, but what you say outside of the product to our liking because of global standards. And the sheer fucking hypocrisy I've seen in this so-called community at that. When the West was forcing Japan to censor, nobody gave a fuck. But then when China forces the West to censor, censorship! China's forcing us to censor in our own country. I got no sympathy for these fuckers. Because the vast majority of them were either completely indifferent or supported the censoring of Japan for global standards. But now that they're on the receiving end, now that they're learning that global standards doesn't mean American standards, and China is forcing the West to censor, now suddenly it's a problem, huh? Well, you fucking idiots should have listened when I was warning you. How many more times am I going to have to say that if you let the front lines fall, if you give the censors any ground, they will just keep going. They'll take what you give them, and then they will demand more, constantly. So it's in your best interests to keep the front lines going as long as possible, to keep the fight away from you as long as possible. But no, you're NPCs. You don't understand this. You're too fucking stupid to get what's going on. You gleefully let the stuff we like get censored. You pointed at us and laughed. Like, oh, wow, you're just mad about children's cartoons and video games. Well, now look who's fucking mad. Now that your shit's getting censored by China, look at all these butthurt neckbeards mad about some fucking children's video games. Why don't you just get a life, loser? If you want violence, you could just watch a movie. You watch a horror movie or something. What's your problem? If you want to talk about freeing Hong Kong, you could do it on something that's not an official Blizzard broadcast. Have you considered that? Yeah, all these athletes too, these fucking hypocrites. Like like LeBron James, Colin Kaepernick, and all them. Like, oh no, you can bend the knee for the U.S. national anthem. We don't have to respect that shit. But then China gets mad. Oh, no, guys, it's wrong to piss China off. No, we got to suck China's dick because they know who's going to be giving them more money in the future, if not already. But this is a prime example of why globalism as a whole is doomed to fail. The only time this could ever be successful is if everybody in the world was forced into the same exact type of society, and even then it would take generations. Everyone who used to live when times were better needs to die off, because otherwise the kids would just constantly be getting told about how awesome things used to be. Like, oh, we used to have something called free speech. It was fucking awesome. You used to actually be able to say something without getting thrown into a gulag. Yeah, you used to be allowed to disagree with the government. Those were the days. That was fucking great, wasn't it? And there's so many things we could be doing, right? I mentioned before, don't ever target things towards a global audience because you will eventually end up at the lowest common denominator. The country in the world with the worst censorship laws is going to be dictating all the rules for everybody else. That's what you're going to get when you want to appeal to a global audience. And I know everyone's saying that, like, well, who cares about some, like, African or Middle Eastern country, like, whatever third world country? No one's going to buy this stuff there anyway. We're not going to appeal to them. Okay, but what about China? The West always is using China as a boogeyman while they do way worse things. But they're always pointing to China and like, oh, look at how horrible China is and their censorship. Oh, how horrible. China has like a quarter of the world's population. That's a market these companies are just having wet dreams over penetrating, pun intended. I said that as a joke, but that's what they want. Like these Chinese, like mobile gamers in particular, have been conditioned to accept pay-to-win microtransactions. Here in the West, we want nothing to do with that shit, but China likes it. And loot boxes. These Western developers have already milked everything they can from the West, so they want China. China's not some insignificant country that no one cares about, but yet the West is always complaining about their censorship, right? Well, now that China has become the lowest common denominator of censorship in the global standards market, guess what everything is going to be dumbed down to appeal to now? Everything you loved before is now going to have to be modified to appease China. And that includes your own content at home. Now, I know there's just like how Japan still, they just make separate versions for the East and the West. If Sony demands censorship, they'll release an uncensored version on the Switch, then fine. There's always going to be companies that do that. So there's going to be companies that do the right thing, in my opinion, and just come up with a different version for each region so that to keep everyone happy. That's the only way to do this correctly. Each fucking country has its own laws, so you do what you got to do in that country, but leave everyone else's shit alone. But developers and Hollywood producers, they're fucking lazy. They're lazy. They're not going to do two different versions. No. Just to save time, money, and resources, they're going to make one version to the lowest common denominator and give that version to everybody. Now, like I just mentioned, you're always going to have a few exceptions. But as time goes on, more and more of them are going to get lazier and lazier. Especially if they notice the dumbed down versions are not flopping. You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of blind fanboys and NPCs that'll buy up anything, so they may keep the industry afloat for a little while, but you see how the AAA developers are struggling. You see the sorry state that Hollywood is in. Hollywood is just a shell of its former self, and the game industry is soon to follow, especially if they keep harping on this global audience bullshit. I don't give a fuck if someone in some other country finds something we have here offensive. They don't have to see it. They don't have to get it. Fuck off. I'm going to have my own shit here, and if they don't like it, they don't have to get it. They can get a censored version for all I care, whatever. And those people who live in that country that want the uncensored version, this is the advantage of the PC. They'll easily be able to get it and mod their censorship out of their game. Like, fuck, we had to do this even back with The Witcher. When the original Witcher launched, those like sex cards you got, like, so you got a card basically whenever you had sex with a woman in that game. The European version of the game, the cards were uncensored. But here in the West, or here in the US rather, I really hate my country sometimes. Because you could show a guy being mutilated and tortured to death, like, oh, that's fine for little Billy to watch. But, oh my God, is that a nipple? Can't have that. So here in the West, the first Witcher game was censored. Because they censored the nipples off of the cards. So what everyone did was they just, like someone who bought the UK version of the game just uploaded their card folders and we just overwrote ours with theirs. Boom, censorship gone. It's out of the way. It was fucking awesome. Now, as long as we got ways like that to remove censorship, then whatever they have to do to get into these territories is fine by me, as long as they don't fuck with the original. But this right there should be the concrete proof that the global audience shit is never going to work and never will work. Because as soon as these companies start dumbing everything down to the lowest common denominator, they're not going to please anybody. So I guess let's get into this again too. I've mentioned this before as well. Some groups are vehemently opposed to each other. It's impossible to please both of them. You can please one or the other or neither of them. But it's literally impossible to please both because they want contradicting things. So if you go for the lowest common denominator, you're actually going to end up not pleasing either of them because there's probably some third party that wants it even worse. So yeah, you're going to please either one or neither of them. Since that's the situation you're in anyway, since you already have to alienate one group, why not just stand by your actual fans who supported you when things were bad? Because I'm just waiting for Blizzard in particular. Imagine if they, after sucking enough Chinese dick, they finally get into China, but they're not nearly as successful as they were hoping to be because, China likes their games looking like Asian style, not Western style. Big shock there, I know. So imagine if after stabbing all of their Western fans in the back, basically telling them they don't need them anymore. Yeah, that's Blizzard at last year's BlizzCon effectively said that. Like J. Allen Brack came out and said, oh, we're going to focus pretty much entirely on mobile now. That's where all of our best developers are. Fuck you PC guys who got us to this place. Fuck all of you. We don't need you anymore. We're going to China. And then during the Diablo Immortal reveal, like, what? Don't you guys have phones? If you want to play the new Diablo game, just play it on your fucking phone. You don't need it on PC, do you? You all got phones. Now imagine if they don't make nearly as much money in China as they were hoping for, and they have to come crawling back after everything they've done. Full disclosure, Blizzard used to be my favorite developer. But I'm done with them. There's nothing they can do now to get me to trust them again. Now, I guess even then there could be a workaround. There's a slight chance because their word is worth nothing now. I can never trust anything they say. But there's the possibility that they can back up their word with something I trust, like legally binding documents, maybe money. Yeah, there's things that they can do to, like Sony, for example, too. I'm never trusting them again. Yeah, their word is worth less than shit. But if they want to back their word up with a document that says if we ever censor anything again for any reason other than the law and the government forced us to, then we're going to refund everybody 3 times what they paid. And we're going to actually fund to have, we're going to pay to have these games ported to other consoles and all that shit just to make sure. I'd be willing to trust them then. because they know if they violate that trust, then there's an actual tangible consequence. But I'm never going to trust their word again. But if they want to back their word up with something I would actually trust, then we can talk. But something tells me they're never going to do that. But I'm really, really looking forward to all these companies like Sony and Blizzard crawling back to the audiences they stabbed in the back on the altar of my global standards once they realize that the new audience they hoped to get doesn't like them nearly as much as we used to. And the schadenfreude is going to be so real when I look down on them and I say, no. While you were busy trying to find a new partner, basically, you were busy courting a new audience, all these other companies rose up in your place to actually give us what we want. We're not going to stab them in the back because then we'd be just like you. We're going to keep supporting these guys who were here for us when you abandoned us. You can go get fucked. Never want to see you guys again. And after enough of that, maybe these industries are finally going to fix themselves. And there's the rant.